Welcome back to the Emily Show, Law Nerd. This is going live on Monday, February 23rd, and we are going to be in trial, but I am recording on Sunday. And because we are going to be covering a bit of the updates, and there are a lot of like spinning out in space updates and then a few actual grounded updates, we're going to cover those. We're going to cover a few Nancy Guthrie updates. I always feel like I need to tell you when I'm recording because there is always the possibility that a lot will change between the time I record and the time that you listen. So recording on Sunday, go live Monday. But Monday, we're back in court for trial with Kouri Richins. And if you are not familiar with that case, buckle up. We're going to talk about that too. And we have a little pop culture docket because, well, I want to talk about The Offspring in the Olympics and Metallica. I never thought I'd see it. And I have never been so happy to turn on Olympic figure skating and be delighted. Also, yeah, the men's Olympic gold medalist dressed like a panda. Not just any panda, Po from Kung Fu Panda. Yeah, we're going to pop culture docket Olympics edition. So let's get into it. I'm legal analyst Emily D. Baker. Yes, also a lawyer. And this is The Emily Show. I break down the pop culture, entertainment, and high profile cases that we're all talking about. I know you want the facts, so let's get into it. So we are back in trial on Monday in the Kouri Richins case. If you are not familiar with Utah versus Kouri Richins, I'm going to give you some of the details in this case and you'll probably go, oh, that one, that's going to trial finally? Yes, because we are going back to Utah for trial for Kouri Richins. You'll recognize the courtroom from the Gwyneth Paltrow ski collision case. That is the last time we were in this courthouse in Summit County. But this is a criminal case, so different judge, different attorneys, the whole 9 yards. But you will love Judge M. He has been even-keeled, and I think the only time I've even had a whisper of anything to say is on occasion, he has erred on the side of caution, which, as a judge in a criminal prosecution, erring on the side of caution is where we are going to see less things available for appeal if there is a conviction. So I understand it, but sometimes I'm like, come on, Your Honor, let's do it. So we've got Judge M, we have prosecutor Brad Bloodworth, and then the defense attorneys you may recognize if you have been following the Tyler Robinson case, the shooting of Charlie Kirk. I have not been covering it, but you will recognize the defense attorneys because they are also the defense attorneys in that case. So you will have seen them in court there, but they are going to be in court for an estimated 4+ weeks of trial. Emily, what is Kouri Richins charged with? Kouri Richins is going to trial for the first-degree aggravated murder of her husband, Eric Richins. Eric Richins died in the overnight hours, March 2nd to March 3rd, 2022. She's also charged with the attempted murder of Eric Richins from February 14th, 2022. Yes, Valentine's Day. We'll talk about it in a moment. She is also charged with 2 false fraudulent insurance claims regarding the death of Eric Richins and 1 count of forgery regarding the death of Eric Richins. Now, this is not her only criminal case pending. This one is going first. She was also subsequently charged in a wide-ranging fraud case. Now, when we talk about the murder of it all and the gathering storm of financial distress, it's similar here, but in Murdaugh, he was stealing from his clients at the law firm. Here, it is, boss babe flipping houses, but really ending up in so much debt that she was servicing thousands and thousands of dollars of debt a week and was running out of options quickly. That's what the prosecution says. The defense says that she was running a very successful business and everything was all good. The subsequent case that is going to either go to trial or resolve after the murder trial involves multiple counts of mortgage fraud, multiple counts of forgery, multiple counts of issuing a bad check relating back to the other 2, right? And numerous counts of money laundering and communications fraud. At the very beginning of this case, the defense had made a motion to remove some of the more distant in time financial crimes, and the judge did sever out a number of the financial crimes that were charged in the original complaint against Kouri Richins. And then they were filed together with additional charges in this case. Now, this is not the only case going on because there are also numerous civil lawsuits that are on hold or stayed. They're stopped. They're stayed dealing with Kouri Richins suing over the estate suing Kouri Richins, and more. Why? Well, to hear the prosecution tell it, Kouri Richins did not know that prior to Eric Richins' death, he had actually changed his will so that there was a more complicated trust scheme. We'll get into the pour over trust of it all another day, but he had changed his will so that Kouri Richins was not the executor of the estate, and all of his property went into a trust that went to the benefit of their 3 small children, and the executor of that estate was his sister. Kouri Richins did not know this. We know that because in the bond hearing and in the preliminary hearing, we heard that when Kouri Richins found out, she absolutely flipped out on her sister-in-law. Some of that will come in at trial. Some of it came in at the bond hearing that won't come in at trial. But she did not know that she was not going to be the one taking the estate after Eric Richins' death, including 50% of his very lucrative stonemasonry business. And under the prenuptial agreement that we have seen in filings and in court, if Eric Richins passed during the course of the marriage, Kouri Richins did get his half of the business. She did get the home that was in his name because he had purchased it prior to marriage. Those were things that went to her. But if they divorced under the prenup, those were things that went to him. And that is going to be litigated in the numerous civil suits regarding the estate. Of course, if she's convicted of his murder, some of those civil suits will resolve by operation of law. So Kouri Richins finds out the day after Eric Richins' death that she's not getting the estate. And the thing is, she's not arrested in this case for over a year. She was arrested May 8th, 2023. And in that time between his passing in March 2022 and when she was arrested, she wrote a children's book about grief and put him on the cover. It's part of the civil lawsuits as well. She was doing TV interviews about helping her children navigate grief. So it was shocking to the Utah community when she was then arrested and charged with his murder by poisoning with fentanyl. And then after she was in custody, she kept up her writing habits with what we call the walk the dog letter. Well,
DOCKET 214, but every law nerd on the internet calls it the walk the dog letter.
Yes, the prosecutor actually said that during a hearing in court, but DOCKET 214, the walk the dog letter, to me, seems to lay out what Kouri Richins wanted her mother and brother to say if they testified at trial. Kouri said in subsequent jail calls that we saw in litigation prior to this coming to trial that this was just a story. It's just a novel. It's part of a novel. It's not real. She also argued it was attorney-client privileged, but there's that. But that wasn't the only thing she wrote, because in the pretrial motions in limine, you know, those motions where the judge decides evidentiary rulings before the jury comes in so they don't have to do it all at sidebar, those. In the motions in limine, we learned that there's also not only notes that Kouri wrote from a police interview that the prosecution argues was her trying to keep her story straight, but there's also a journal where she wrote about the day of March 2nd and March 3rd. And in police interviews, Kouri Richins said that they were celebrating her closing on another property and she had made both of them drinks, a lemon drop and a Moscow Mule. You will see the Moscow Mule referenced a lot. And the defense says the prosecution can't prove what drink Eric Richins drank. Based on what we saw at the preliminary hearing, though, the prosecution is going to be able to prove that Eric Richins had a 5 times lethal dose of fentanyl in his system and no fentanyl was found in the house, and the dishes in the sink had been cleared. So those drink glasses had been cleaned prior to Kouri Richins calling 911 and saying that she had found her husband unresponsive. Also, her story to law enforcement, the prosecution says, doesn't quite match up with the digital evidence, and we're going to see that at trial. But what about Valentine's Day? Well, Kouri Richins went and picked up her husband a breakfast egg sandwich, and then after eating it, he fell incredibly ill. There were communications he made to friends saying, "You almost lost me," communications with her about needing to go to the hospital and thinking he might need to go to the hospital. This is going to be, I think, one of the more difficult counts for the prosecution to prove that she did poison that sandwich. And the evidentiary rulings on whether or not statements of Eric Richins will come in, some of them are still pending. So it's really just going to depend on how the evidence develops and how Eric Richins was communicating to friends, but the prosecution has a very circumstantial case there. However, Kouri Richins does apparently reach out via Facebook Messenger to her contact that was the go-between to procure fentanyl for her and asked for something stronger after Valentine's Day, shortly before Eric Richins' death. So based on that, we will see how the prosecution develops the circumstances around the attempted murder on Valentine's Day. In many attempted murder cases, you generally have the person that survived, the victim, coming in and telling what happened. Here, because of the subsequent murder, you don't, making it a little more difficult for prosecutors. Also, on Valentine's Day, I think we're going to see quite a bit of evidence that Kouri Richins was not where she said she was going. She said she was going to work on one of the houses that she was flipping and have cabinets installed. Her words, not mine. But she was with her paramour, as he is referred to in the court filings, because it seemed that she was also having an extramarital affair. And the prosecution has introduced in other hearings text messages where Kouri Richins tells the paramour, just wait till Friday. March 2nd was a Thursday. March 3rd was a Friday. So it's going to be interesting to see how that comes in. And if the paramour does, in fact, testify, we'll see. So Kouri Richins is going to trial, and in pretrial hearings, the defense told the court that they needed time because it was their intention that Kouri Richins would be testifying. Now, once you see all those jurors looking you in the face, all 12 of them, and that's 12 total because in Utah, this deliberating jury is 8 with 4 alternates. But sometimes once you see the jury reacting to the prosecution's case or not for a number of weeks, defendants can change their mind. And of course, we have heard defendants before indicate that they intend to testify and then not do so. But I think Kouri Richins is going to go the Murdaugh route and testify. We'll see. I might be wrong. You're going to need the Lawnard app to make sure that you are in the loop if she does take the stand. And of course, we are starting with opening statements Monday. And well, I know that I'll see you there in the chat, but let me know in the comments here. Do you think Kouri Richins is going to testify, or do you think she's going to go full Donna Adelson and Brian Walsh and just be like, nope, I'm not testifying? We will have to wait and see. Now, of course, there's a lot of details that we have not gotten into, but the overview of the case is that there are a lot of jail calls and writings of Kouri Richins coming in that might also lean towards her wanting to testify to explain some of the things that she said, because you guys, she's a writer. And we have playlists on this channel and on the stream channel, the Emily D. Baker, with the breakdown of this case. And if you want to catch up on the case briefs, we will be doing those every day during trial. So the case briefs will be live the next morning before we go live for trial. And we're in Mountain Time. So for those of you on the East Coast, you're going to get around a lunchtime trial start. For those of you on the West Coast, it's not going to be the middle of the morning. So, trial around 10 o'clock a.m. Central. It's going to be great. I'm very excited. So I look forward to seeing you in trial. Make sure you have the Lawnard app. And if you're like, Emily, girl, why are you speaking at 9,000 miles a minute? Dr. B and I have plans after I'm done recording the podcast, so I need to go get ready. But I'm really excited because tonight I am trying out some of my new items from Honeylove, who is a sponsor of today's episode. Huge thank you to our sponsor, Honeylove. Lawnard, especially if you were on stream last week, how I feel about just like getting the right bra, feeling yourself, and getting out there. My Honeylove bras absolutely allow me to do that. I love the ones with the adjustable straps. And Honeylove is adding a new cross flex sports bra. It's a sports bra that's designed for like all day wear, which oftentimes I do anyway. So you get that supportive feeling without tight, stiff, and suffocating. And the back is a hook and eye, so you don't have to like stretch it out and pull it over your head, which I hate. And they use their proprietary cloud fuse bonding, so it's not going to poke or dig or rub weird. I cannot wait to get mine. It is on the way and I am ready. Right now you can save big with Honeylove's new crossover triple bra bundle, 3 bras at once for huge savings. If you love the Honeylove bras, they have something new for you. Honeylove's new crossover contour bra, combining the wireless crossover design with light foam pads for support and a contoured shape. Lawnard, if you're ready to treat yourself to the most advanced bras and shapewear on the market, Use our exclusive link to save 20% off Honeylove at honeylove.com/Lawnerd. That's honeylove.com/Lawnerd for 20% off. And after you check out, if they asked how you found them, let them know it was the Emily Show. Let's get back to it. Last night, as I was sitting down to watch the Olympic figure skating gala exhibition event, which I was very excited for, and happened to get on my phone because I had gotten the podcast prep I was going to record after I watched the exhibition because I wanted to watch US hockey this morning, Sunday morning. That was exciting. That was very exciting. However, the Canadian men did win in curling, and I was a little feisty about that. I still maintain they booped the snoot, but you know, who am I? I'm a curling expert once every 4 years, like everyone else on the internet. I'm joking. I know that I'm totally not a curling expert. I am an internet meme expert, kind of. But as I was sitting down to watch the gala event that we're going to talk about in the pop culture docket in a few, I opened my phone to find that Sheriff Nanos had given another interview in addition to a fleet of interviews that he had given on February 17th. And he interviewed with numerous outlets in like 10-minute increments. And it was like handpicked media, 10-minute increments. You're in, you're out. That's it. Those were the updates. So from last podcast to now, I am going to try to fill in the things that we know, the things that we don't, and the things that are still developing. Because at the end of the day, we are now 3 weeks in and we do not know where Nancy Guthrie is. And that is concerning. However, in the Brian Kohberger case, in the Tepe case, and in others, it can take time. And in both the Tepe case and the Kohberger case, particularly, when we finally saw probable cause affidavits, we saw that there was so much more known than we knew at the time. I am still holding out hope that that's the case here. However, the stark difference in those cases is that in those cases, they knew that they were investigating homicides. In this case, it is still a missing person case, and time is ever so precious when you are dealing not only with a missing person case, but with a missing vulnerable person. We know that Nancy Guthrie didn't have her medication with her, that it was necessary. We heard that very early on from Savannah Guthrie. So now that we are 3 weeks in, there is a lot of speculation, and there's only so much that the public knows between the last updates last week and now. However, we're going to go over the things that we know. We're going to go over the things that some think are a big deal that maybe I don't think are as big of a deal. And of course, there's always a TMZ component because it seems that they're the only people anyone wants to communicate with. And TMZ said they weren't going to announce any more communications. And then the next day, TMZ was like, and we received another ransom note. All of that is for the FBI. The only thing I'm going to say about any communications demands or supposed ransom notes is that from all of the reporting from everyone, no one has indicated that a proof of life has been given. And that is a very significant fact because proof of life generally leads to ransoms being paid, or they can, and things moving forward more quickly. That's not what's happening in this case, and that's not what we've seen. And we're learning that because numerous outlets had access to the Bitcoin wallet address and have been monitoring it, and no one has said that any money other than a tester amount was deposited into those. So when it comes to communications, I do not know if those are real communications from individuals who have information about this case or have Nancy Guthrie, or if they are a hoax. We do not know. And it's going to take some time for us to know. I lean more towards the latter than the former, just based on how long it took for those initial communications to happen and based on the fact that there is still no proof of life that we have heard about. So what has gone on this week? Well, I'm happy to see that there's actual regular daily updates from the sheriff's department, and a number of reporters are just posting those in full on social media so that we can see the entirety of the update instead of what the sheriff's department says. Pima County Sheriff is just like, no press conference scheduled. I don't know why they can't just put the emails up there too. Let's look at the update from Friday because there's quite a lot of information in it that we need to break down. And then we're going to go to the sheriff's late interview Friday that wasn't dropped by NBC until Saturday. All right. And looking at that update from February 21st, Neighborhood activity update. Detectives and agents are back today in the Guthrie neighborhood canvassing as a part of the investigation. No additional details will be provided. We appreciate the cooperation. And then they also changed the traffic pattern to a one-way. So they had temporarily moved out some media and then changed the flow of traffic and blocked things off. They then go on to say gloves. Detectives and agents have collected multiple gloves from the area, and analysis is part of the investigation. Specific details about these pieces of evidence will not be shared publicly as this remains an active investigation. Fair. Resources. There have been no changes to resources in this investigation. There may be fluctuations day to day based on investigative leads. Several hundred law enforcement personnel remain dedicated to this case. This will remain an active investigation until Nancy Guthrie is found or all leads are exhausted. I imagine we will see scaling in the weeks to come if they are still waiting on things like DNA results, because there is only so much you can do if you are still waiting on information and there are no new leads to develop. DNA. They say all evidence from the crime scene and search warrant scenes has been submitted for analysis. Lab experts are working through the analysis. As with any biological evidence, there can be challenges separating DNA. There are currently no updates regarding this process. Asterisks on that because he touches on it more in NBC. It seems that challenges is exactly what they are running into with mixed DNA samples, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Other inquiries. Helicopter landfill. The private aerial activity near a landfill yesterday was not related to this investigation. Evidence request time. The link for video evidence requests has a, quote, report filed date of January 31st at 5 p.m. This is a third-party software issue. There have been conflicting reports from the sheriff himself about this, but they have a community link website where people can submit their Ring doorbell footage or things that they know, and the date on that said that the report filed was January 31st at 5 p.m. Initially, the sheriff said, oh, well, that's the date we're looking for evidence from. But Nancy Guthrie wasn't even reported missing until February 1st, so it was confusing to many. And the sheriff had said, no, but it's because that's the date we're looking for. We want things from January 31st forward. And then came out and contradicted that with, it's a third-party software issue. It then says we are requesting video evidence from January 1st, 26 and February 2nd, 2026. The reported date and time listed on the link has nothing to do with when Nancy Guthrie was reported missing the following day. And then it includes that link. Private search parties. Volunteer search groups have inquired about being in the area. Per the sheriff, they were asked to please give investigators the space they need to do their work. We appreciate their concern, and we all want to find Nancy, but this work is best left to professionals. PCSD has volunteer opportunities if they wish to get involved with the department. Private property laws apply. It is up to each individual property owner to grant permission for anyone to be on their property. Media availability. There are currently no press briefings scheduled. We do not anticipate any sheriff media activity next week. If that changes, we will let you know. He gave an interview the same night. This is from the 21st. Not that long before his other interview with NBC went live, though. I do think that interview was recorded Friday, the 20th. However, he keeps saying there's no press briefings. We do not anticipate any media activity. And then they roll out all this media activity. Regarding the private search parties, I saw on social media that there were search groups organizing and that they on Sunday went out and did some searching and found a backpack that does not match in any way the backpack that was in this case. Not the same type, not the same size, not the same brand, but it was recovered. Sheriffs did take it and took it with them, that they do not believe it's connected to this case. I'm sure we will hear more about that in the days to come. But about the DNA, it seems that there is some difficulty in parsing samples from the mixed DNA from inside Nancy Guthrie's house. I had hoped to hear more about the DNA from inside Nancy Guthrie's house because I am not clear how the glove from 2 miles away, recovered more than 10 days later, is connected back to the crime scene. Things in Nancy Guthrie's house might have more evidentiary and investigative value. But now we're hearing that the reason that we have not seen that DNA submitted is because they are having a hard time isolating out DNA samples from a mixed sample. Let's take a look at what the sheriff told NBC on February 20th, aired February 21st. The sheriff was asked about the speed of this investigation and told reporters from NBC that it's never fast enough.
It's never fast enough for the sheriff. I want it like you. Come on, guys, let's go, let's find her. But the reality is I also know that sometimes things take time.
They tell us that they spoke to him late Friday and then get into some of the questions I wanted to hear answered as well.
Are there names you're looking into?
No.
Would you say the investigation is growing or shrinking?
In terms of leads and working and getting out there, I think that's still growing, yeah.
So the sheriff thinks that the leads are still growing, and those are the leads from the public, generally in the form of tips, because they have received tens of thousands of tips, both to Pima County Sheriffs and the FBI.
I think we're getting a little closer to identifying some of the other articles, not just that backpack, like the shoes, the pants, the shirt or jacket.
I think they're also probably trying to identify the holster that's being used and the type of face covering that's being used. He doesn't mention that. But the reason he's talking about no names is because we have seen Brian Enton and others report that, in fact, the FBI was going around 2 different weapon stores with a list of names and photos and going around to hotels asking if they had anyone, matching names, descriptions, etc. So we had seen reports about that, and the sheriff is saying, no, we are not following any names. And then we hear about the DNA issues.
Another key lead, unknown DNA found inside the Guthrie home.
Our lab tells us that there's challenges with it. The technology is moving so fast and in such a frenzy that
I don't quite understand what the sheriff means that technology is moving so fast and in such a frenzy. The DNA technology is quite good. The concern for me is if they have mixed samples, which we have seen in the Karen Reed case and others, are the samples not large enough to actually make individual DNA samples? Or if they have no known samples, is it too hard to kind of untangle where those samples go and develop those into full samples because they are multiple mixed samples? So there's a couple reasons this might be difficult. However, if it's either not a large enough sample size or it's mixed with so many contributors that are unknown that they can't parse out individual samples, then I don't know if a change in technology is actually going to help that circumstance, and it might not, which is concerning.
they think some of this stuff will resolve itself just in a matter of weeks, months, or maybe a year.
Weeks, months, or maybe a year does not also give me optimism. At the end of that interview that was incredibly brief, they asked the sheriff if there's any news or any words for the Guthrie family, and he says, "We're going to find her," and seems emotional while saying that. He also gave a number of interviews on February 17th, and in those interviews with Brian Enton, Fox Digital News, and a local ABC 15 in Arizona, he talks about whether or not there is more camera footage and if there might be more camera footage. And he gives a very long example saying they're trying to recover it and maybe they will recover more. We're hopeful that they'll recover more. And in one of those interviews on the 17th, Sheriff Nanos said that they had over 50,000 leads, but also talked about the fact that they are using software to categorize those leads from a level 1, most important, red alert, critical urgent, to a level 4, which are not as relevant or not relevant to the case in any way, or are just people calling the sheriff's department to give their opinions on the case, which I imagine are largely not positive. I am curious as to what type of algorithm that software is using, but he did not expand on that anymore. But in another interview, the sheriff indicated that they had over 30,000 leads. So is it 30,000, 40,000, 50,000? It's difficult. And he was asked, why not just give a press conference? And he did acknowledge that the first press conference was kind of a mess, and then didn't really answer the rest of the question about why he's not giving press conferences and why he's choosing which media can sit down for 10 minutes and then go. It would seem again to me that either a consistent message at a press conference or the daily emails. I'm happy that that's happening, to give daily investigative updates and just leave it at that. But this is not the only time Pima County Sheriff is in the media, because the thing I saw, and maybe this just gets us into the pop culture docket, because the thing I saw on social media that lots were talking about is that apparently Pima County Sheriff is involved in a reality show on A&E, who's not a sponsor here, but we do have a sponsor that's going to keep me going through trial, Hungryroot. You are going to see me munching on some of my favorites. A huge thank you to our sponsor, Hungryroot. Laundered, you know that I went and placed a Hungryroot order before trial so that I had stuff that I could snack on during trial, because do not sleep on the sour, crunchy gummy rings. You will see me probably eating too many of them. But I also got some breakfast sandwiches to try to reduce how late I am to stream. But what I love about Hungryroot is that I can customize it for what I need in a given week. Because as I'm getting into trial, I need things for breakfast and lunch more than I need dinners. But some weeks I need dinners, and Hungryroot gives that flexibility between groceries, meals that are easy to prepare, or meals that you want to take a little bit more time with and enjoy. Breakfast, lunch, or dinner, healthy snacks that you're gonna love. It's flexible, and it's super easy to go in their app, skip a week, change the delivery day, pick your free item so that it is as flexible as you are. So if you are ready for over 50,000 chef-crafted recipes to choose from each week, and a lot of them are ready in 15 minutes or less, and that's like for real, Hungryroot has you covered. I know you're going to love Hungryroot as much as I do. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box plus a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/Lawnerd and use code Lawnerd. That's hungryroot.com/Lawnerd with code Lawnerd to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice in every box for life. Let's get back to it. A&E Desert Law followed around Pima County Sheriffs and started airing in January. I've seen numerous reports that this case is not being covered on that show. I do not know if cameras are up or cameras are down, and I didn't know I needed to ask that question. Like, when Jen Shaw got arrested after fleeing the parking lot of Beauty Lab and Laser on Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, I knew enough to ask if cameras were up or cameras were down. I didn't know that when we were dealing with Pima County Sheriffs, I needed to ask if cameras were up. I had no idea. I feel caught unaware. But if you have A&E, apparently Desert Law focuses on Pima County Sheriffs. Yeah, Lawnerd, I was surprised too. I was surprised too that there's a TV show. I'm also surprised that it took like 2 weeks for it to really come up. So there's one season so far with 7 episodes. This is the treatment about the show. When the blistering Arizona sun finally sets over Tucson's Sonoran Desert, the temperature drops and the crime rises. With elite access to one of the largest departments in America, quote unquote, Desert Law follows the high intensity work of the Pima County Sheriff's Department, its patrol deputies, DUI unit, and night detectives as they cover more than 9,000 square miles of rugged terrain, taking on the trouble that thrives after dark. Immersed in the pressure and danger of policing the desert night, the series captures a world where the spirit of the Old West still lingers and the fight for order never ends. So if you've seen Desert Law, let me know. I have not had a chance to watch it. I've been watching the Olympics, which we're going to talk about more in just a minute. But where are we at the end of week 3? The DNA inside the house is not done being processed, and it seems that the mixed samples is causing the lab some difficulty. The lab that this was sent to is a very well-respected lab. I imagine that if this lab is having difficulty, any lab would be having difficulty. Also, just remember, I'm sure there are plenty that are going to be critical. Why wasn't this sent to the FBI lab? The FBI lab also does not process SNPs, which is the different type of DNA sequencing that needs to be done for IgG DNA. So even if this had originally gone to the FBI, it would still have to be sent back to another lab to process it for the investigative genetic genealogy, which we know that they are starting to do, which we saw in the Koberger case and others. So even if it went to the FBI, it would have still had to go out to a different lab. This is a lab that is more than capable of doing that. And if they are having difficulty with a mixed DNA sample, most labs, I would think, would be having the same difficulty. And it seems that they have done this enough that if they need to ask another lab for assistance, then they are going to be able to do so. But I do not think this is a problem with the lab. I think this is a problem with the sample that would cause a problem for any lab that had the samples. which is going to raise more questions about when were the samples taken, what samples were taken, the crime scene being released, and if enough samples were taken. And those are very fair criticisms and questions. I just don't know if we're going to have the answers to them anytime soon. What else do we know? Well, we know that numerous individuals were detained and questioned last week and released. No charges, no arrest. Lawyers for both individuals, separate lawyers, separate individuals, have come out and said that their clients were not in any way connected to this case, don't know about the case, don't know about Nancy Guthrie, and have nothing to do with it. We know that vehicles are being processed. We know that things were taken from the crime scene, biological evidence, technical evidence, digital evidence, and more. And we know that all of that is still in the process. Those things can take time. Again, in a case like Kouri or the Teppies, it's frustrating when it takes time to make an arrest. However, those are murder investigations. When you're looking at a missing person, time feels different because you still want to recover someone alive. And that is where this case, I think, is reaching a level of frustration, is that it is not a murder investigation waiting for an arrest. It is still a missing person case because there's no indication one way or the other as to Nancy Guthrie. And we know that there was a lot of discussion about Mexico this week. Was Nancy Guthrie taken to Mexico? Could she have been taken to Mexico? And the FBI was talking to their counterparts in Mexico and to the offices that the FBI maintains in Mexico. I would imagine that in this region of Arizona that is so close to the border, that in a missing person case that has gone on for more than a week, that's going to happen no matter what, whether or not there's indication that she was taken across the border at all. That is just going to be part of your investigative follow-up. And we saw Mexican authorities saying that they have no indication that Nancy Guthrie is in Mexico, but there was much concern about why is the FBI talking to the authorities there? Well, because she's now been missing for 3 weeks and someone could have easily gotten across the border under the cover of darkness. And of course, they want authorities that are an hour away to be on the lookout if they see anything. That is a natural part of the investigative process. But it does not seem that there is any one thing that points investigators to believe that she has traveled south of the border. She could have traveled anywhere in the amount of time that they have at this point. I think we will probably see less updates. I hope we will continue to see the daily updates from the sheriff and maybe less interviews, because I think that that's probably helpful at this point. But I don't know what's going to happen this week. I've already seen that the coverage of Nancy Guthrie has started to shift to stories talking about the coverage of Nancy Guthrie instead of talking about new updates, what's happening, or what's next. It is now infighting amongst those covering the case. And whenever it turns to stories about coverage of the case versus actual stories about the case, it indicates to me that there's not as much information and that there's not as much confidence that there will be new information. And then you start to see coverage of the coverage. And, well, y'all know how I feel about that. I don't have a lot of warmth for the media covering the alternative media. I don't know. Half the media personalities all have their own podcast on YouTube anyway. I mean, I get it. But I think there's fair criticisms of those in legacy media and new media for their coverage, and there's unfair criticisms of both for their coverage. But when the story becomes who's covering the case, it means you don't have a lot on the case. And that concerns me more. So, speaking of pop culture docket, that's what we're going to talk about now. Because if you enjoy the Olympics, which you know I very much do, I love getting into sports that I check in with every couple of years. I love watching figure skating. I was thrilled to see figure skating in ice dancing to The Offspring, first of all. Second of all, in the gala, I never expected to see the Italian pair skating team come out to Macarena, into YMCA, into Cotton Eye Joe, and then do all the dances that go with that music on the ice. I've never seen anyone do the Cotton Eye Joe on the ice. I've seen a bunch of kids do it at high school football games. I've never seen anyone do it on the ice. I was delighted. Also, the men's gold medalist did a whole kung fu fighting, kung fu panda routine with some of the other male figure skaters and then used Jack Black's cover of Britney Spears. I wish I could play it for you. I will link it down below. It was iconic. I absolutely loved it. It was hilarious. It was very ice capades. I've never seen an Olympic gold medalist skate in a panda costume. I was here for it. I don't know if everybody was here for it. I don't really care. I was here for it. I was delighted. I was also delighted seeing the US team doing their routines. Brian was like, what is this mix of Freebird? I'm like, oh, that's like the TikTok one. You know the one I'm talking about, the one that is all over social media. That's the one that they use. Brian's like, what is this? I'm like, that's the short form content mix of Freebird. Yeah, everything that the US team skated to seemed to be in like short form content chunks. And then I have to say how much I loved watching ADHD baddie Alyssa Liu skate her gold medal winning performance. I cried. I did. And I'm not afraid to say it because A, there was so much joy in her performance. B, I resonate with somebody who's like, I think I need to step away from this and like reclaim my life. And then is like, I've reclaimed my life. Take it or leave it, bitches. I'm going to do it my way. And I loved every minute of it. I loved watching it. I loved her joy in skating. I loved how strong she was on the ice. I loved absolutely everything about it. And I loved the unapologetic, I'm coming back to the Olympics to do it for me, to do it the way I want to do it and to have fun with it. And then seeing some of the interviews her coaches have given, talking about the fact that they struggle trying to get her to not change her routine at the last minute because she's gotten bored doing it over and over again. I was like, I relate, but I really appreciate her story of stepping away and coming back with joy to do it for her, to do it for fun, and to do it the way she wanted to do it. And I think that's just incredibly inspiring, A, to see someone figure that out young, which is just such a blessing. I wish I had figured it out much sooner in life. Like, no, I'm going to do this the way I want to do it. And especially being neurodivergent, I'm going to do it the way I need to do it. And I'm just going to build it myself. And I love that spirit of just, I'm going to build it myself. Let's just do it the way we want to do it. I'm going to skate to what I want to skate to. I'm going to wear what I want to wear. I'm going to work on my own choreography, and I'm not just going to follow the way that I should do it. And I just resonated so much with that because I have found myself feeling the exact same way. I know so many of you have. It's something I talk to my kids about a lot. You can't just follow what you think you should be doing. You have to figure out the way it works best for you. And I love seeing that highlighted on an Olympic stage. It was absolutely a delight. So if you see her skate, I know that NBC has put it on YouTube, thankfully, so you can go watch it. If you're in the US, I don't know how that works elsewhere because NBC blocks sometimes out of the country. But if you can go watch her skate, I hope that you also see the joy. And it also gave me just a lot of hope watching people say, you know what, I'm going to figure out how to do it my way and what works best for me. And when I step into joy, I can also step into greatness. And I love that. For all the things I loved about the Olympics this year, because I love a good Olympic meme, I loved our man, the dog, the wolf dog, Nazul, just pure joy. I loved seeing the moments of joy during these games. I loved the irreverence of seeing skaters skate to Metallica and The Offspring, which I never thought it would happen, and Jack Black singing Britney Spears and K-pop Demon Hunters. I love it. I love that it can be so serious, but also it doesn't have to take itself too seriously. And that was my takeaway this Olympics. I still feel very seriously about the curling boop, and I feel very seriously about US hockey because I'm sorry, Team Canada, but it was nice to see. For everyone who watched hockey for the first time because of heated rivalry, I know isn't hockey great. For everyone who has been hockey fans for a long time, yes, it's your time. Yes, you've been waiting for this. Yes, it's absolutely incredible. And for all of us that are going to look at our kids and be like, look, this was such a big deal when it happened in the 80s. And our kids are like, don't they all just play in the NHL together? Fine. But those of us that are excited. And I hope you are too. Leonard, thank you for being part of my joy and letting me do this here. I've shared a bit about that with you this week in the Leonard app and here on YouTube for our members and a little bit on social because I was getting all emo about just how incredible this community is and how much I enjoy spending time with you. And I can't wait to see you in the chat for trial because it's time. It's time for gavel to gavel trial coverage. So Leonard, get prepared. It's time to get to court. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being Leonard. I'll see you in the next one. And I'll see you in trial. You guys, it's time.
Bring the jury.
Cheers. Thanks for joining me. If you enjoyed this episode and don't want to miss updates on your favorite cases, you're going to need the LawNerd app at lawnerd.app.com. That way you can stay in the loop on the cases that matter most to you, and you never know when you're going to catch feelings for a new case. So make sure you get it for free on iOS and Android. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being a Law Nerd.